use these energy efficiencies and affordable housing and everything that we do in our cars. And so I think that we try to reach out to everyone in the community, and everyone has participated mostly.
So you get across the board participation.
Yes.
Well, and also what's really been helpful there is we're reaching out to schools where the whole diversity of the community is there. Or we're reaching out to houses of worship where so we're reaching people in all sorts of different ways.
Also, almost every single program we propose is a money saver. So that is relevant for everyone. But we are looking now, we don't do enough that is specifically focused on the low and moderate income community. And in our plan for the next 10 years, we'd like to do more of a focus on that and figure out how we can be effective in that community as well.
I have three questions that basically all connect together. What is your annual budget? How much of that is for personnel? And what amount of money comes to you from the town?
Okay, the annual budget is... Yeah, no, I think it's really relevant.
So the annual budget, well, first of all, we started, I think the first year annual budget was $50,000. And now our annual budget is about $300,000. And just trying to think.
We get funding. We raise money primarily from citizens. This is where wealthy community does impact, I think, our organization, because we raise the money from local citizens. We have had one foundation say to us, we don't want to support you because we think you can raise it in your own community.
So I don't know the exact percent that is staff, but it is our biggest line item in the budget. But I will tell you that the money that goes to staff is money that's going to programming.
Yeah.
That's
And you guys are a 401c3?
501. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And does the town of Bedford support you financially in any way?
In small ways.
Yeah, in the beginning, not at all, but more recently, in programs that they would like to pursue, frequently we will bring a program to the town board, and they will say, yeah, we really want to do that program. We'll say, well, we need some help on this, but it's very small.
Yeah. I believe it's around 20,000.
And that's recent.
Yeah,
That's
and last year.
And through the years, as we Bedford 2020, with the funds that we raised, we produce, all of the educational materials that went to community members to double or more than double our recycling rate. We pay for the summits that we host and for our workshops, and so we are investing back the money that we raise back into our community.
We have 2 staff members. That's it. But the other side of that is that our board is a working board. I mean, we have a model where you take waste and recycling, and we have reached out to the community and say, who is interested in waste and recycling? We don't say who is, we identify who is, and we bring a group of maybe 5 to 10 people into a room and say, okay, what do you think are the most important issues relating to waste and recycling? This is in the beginning. We wouldn't do that now because we know what the issues are. But in the beginning we did that, and people went around the room, and they all had an expertise. And then we said, so if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do in Bedford? And everyone had ideas, and at the end of the meeting we said, how many people would like to join the task force on waste and recycling? And we had a 100% response rate for every single task force where we did that. And that's how we formed our active groups. And with waste and recycling, we have a guy who heads it up, Peter Conrad, who has been a consultant in waste and recycling for his entire career. He's retired now, and he does it all now for free. And it's been a huge value. So when we say we have 2 staff, we also have a lot of experts working on specific areas. And people like to give back. They appreciate not being hit to write a check, but to use their expertise.
So you mentioned that your 20% reduction includes community. Can you talk about how you're collecting and aggregating community data? I mean, government data is easy.
No, you're right. The community data is the hard bit.
Yeah.
And so for some things like waste and recycling, we have very, very specific data because we require the haulers to file reports, and we know exactly, I think we started out with a 16% recycling rate. We're now up to what, 36%? 40%. With transportation, it is very difficult to measure. We know, again, with the municipal, we can measure it very easily. But with the community, it is much harder. You have to extrapolate data from EPA and county data, and that kind of thing. So it varies according to the data.
But we do get data from Con Ed and NYSEG and Westchester Power and natural gas usage. So wherever we can, we collect data, and then as Ellen said, we're working with this company called VHB, who's sort of, I think, the preeminent group that does this, and they extrapolate some data as well. And I also just do want to point out that, because it's really important if you want to be a climate smart community, that we're measuring within the community measure data. We do measure municipal action. So we have municipal action in our climate action plan. There's municipal energy action and community energy action, and for every action area. And that's important to be a climate smart community, but much more important, that's important because obviously the municipal buildings and fleet, etc., and recycling practices model for the entire community.
In Bedford, the municipal contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is quite small. It's like 1-2%. It is the community that is generating the most greenhouse gas emissions. But as Midge said, modeling what the municipality does is of huge impact because it models to all the residents and small businesses.
First of all, thank you so much for coming. I just want to say that. But I'm curious, do you have plans for locally generated electricity?
Well, we are members of CCA, and we've opted for the green energy. And under CCA, there is, and I know that Brian has participated in this, there's a Public Service Commission request for comments on the something that's quite technical, which is consolidated billing. But the actual impact of allowing consolidated billing would be that you could have community solar, community-generated renewable solar, wind, or whatever, hydro, can be a part of CCA, and that is going to make a huge difference for communities all through New York State.
Hi, I just have two quick questions. One is, have you had any successes around encouraging people to drive less? Like, have there been any tactics that you've used that have worked?
We initially got into bike paths and had a bike committee, and we're really pushing that. But Bedford's roads are old and narrow and have stone walls and trees, and people get upset when you interfere with those items. So we had to compromise with our bike lanes and trying to connect the hamlets. We have 3 hamlets, and Bedford is 40 square miles, so we're quite spread out. And we had to compromise with a 4-foot bike path instead of a 12 that the bike committee wanted. But we do encourage carpooling. We have a non-idling law, 3 minutes. We're changing our whole fleet to electric and hybrid cars. And so we've really worked on it, but it's difficult. I think more and more. When I grew up, I was one of 5 children. We had 1 car, and and when my kids were growing up, they all wanted a car. We had 5 cars. So it's the wrong kind of trend. We talk to municipal officials about motorized scooters and bike sharing. Bedford is so spread out that that's a difficult concept, and there are issues with that too, because they're hyper dangerous, I think, and you don't know when you're doing a motorized scooter. But there are all kinds of options. We look at everything, carpooling. There's a park bus that comes over from Louisville to the train station to try to cut down on commuter traffic, but it's difficult.
We do when we have an event, like one of our big summits, we do offer carpooling in a Tesla. So try to get kill two birds with one stone.
Is there anything that you've been able to do about the packaging in the grocery store besides having farmers markets?
Mm. Do you have any suggestions?
I just gnash my teeth every time I go to the grocery store. I don't know what to do.
It's huge.
I mean, they're packaging, bananas in a plastic box.
I know, it just gets worse and worse every
It
day.
gets worse every day, yeah. So there's nothing, you haven't found anything.
It's on our list for our 2020, things we need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
It's on the list. Who knows if it will rise to the top.
I think it has to come from the customers and tell them, you don't want all this packaging. I think Costco is one of the world's big box stores. They have that. So I guess it's for security reasons, so things aren't stolen, but it's hard even to get into it. So I think we have to demand that they cut down on the packaging, and then they'll respond to the customers.
Boycotts. Yeah, petitions and posters in front of the store.
Have you been able to reduce the use of plastic bags, not only in supermarkets, but the CVS and the little stores?
So our law in Bedford is, I believe it's stores that are over 5,000 square feet. When we went to talk to the local retailers, there was a ton of pushback, and they said being a Main Street business is hard enough, and the last thing we want to do is not give our customers a bag if they want it. So what we ended up doing was passing the law in the larger size stores, and initially it looks like it's working, but we need to do some more surveying. But simultaneously, we went to the local businesses and we gave some of them reusable bags. We gave them signage to saying, please use a reusable bag. I'm sure in many of your communities, like Bedford, a lot of the local retailers now, small ones, ask if you want a bag. So, we may, I don't know if we may extend it to those businesses, but that's really been a great way to get collaboration and compliance from those businesses.
I think it's also a problem that the people are so used to using those bags, they're not bothering, because down here they have given out reusable bags, and I think I'm one of the only people that goes back, takes it out of my car and goes into the store and uses it.
Once you get that 10% charge, you only forget it in your car sometimes.
And it's the money, and it's also a little bit of shaming. When at least over these initial months when the law has been in place, in every grocery store, there is a sign, right above the checkout counter, and when you look around, people are either have their bags or they're buying the bags, so you really have to kind of be willing to be that, that bad person that takes those ugly yellow bags out of the store.
This guy.
Yeah. The gentleman in the back there.
You talked a little bit about big projects as well as small projects. There's one big project that I know some municipalities are considering, and I just wondered if it's come up in your thoughts over there. And that is that we're told that weather will become more severe with climate change, and we can expect the severity of big storms to be even worse, as we've seen. So some municipalities are looking at municipal resiliency zones, which would incorporate usually solar production, sometimes on carports, and electric vehicle charging with it, battery storage, and then enclosing the whole thing in a microgrid so that if the main grid goes down, your first responders, your health professionals and so forth have a way to come and charge and keep things going. Now, That's very, very ambitious, but it seems like a big project that would have a lot of payoff. Has anything like that come up in Bedford?
We have as every town does, an EOC committee that looks at these issues. And I don't know if that specific thing has come up, but they meet every month and we look at resiliency and mitigation measures. And every town has to have a mitigation plan for emergencies and power outages. I think we have at this point 8 charging stations up there, so we have quite a number of them. All the townhouses are on generators, so, and we have solar on our water filtration plant, and we're going to have a solar on the police station and on our highway garage.
Can you talk a little bit about how you engage the schools, and whether the schools bought into it from the school board point of view, or you had persuaded, you had to arm twist them, and how much of an impact they make?
Well, so engaging schools is challenging. Schools are busy, they have their own agenda. So our biggest success really has been this Greenlight Award program. It's not only allowing us to engage students, but we are meeting administrators, we're meeting faculty members, we're having conversations with schools that we hadn't had before. In Bedford Central School District, this is really something we haven't done a lot of. We've gone in and done some recycling days and tried to get the school to do better recycling. We would like to work with the schools on recycling, and we would also love to work with the schools to find a way to get an electric school bus in our community.
Do the schools have electric atop solar?
No solar on that.
And actually in Charlottesville, they have some solar.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would add too that at the county level, there are some resources right now in the works as part of the County Climate Crisis Task Force, and that will be as part of the county's Recycle Right campaign, to be working with the schools and offering all the resources that they can offer to get the schools on board for reducing food waste specifically and increasing recycling rates.
Schools are an enormous resource. It's really, it is a very, very important target, and yet we have not had a tremendous success with schools. It's been very hard. I know there's a K solar program, and we tried to talk to the Bedford Central School District about it, and there were so many barriers that it just was like, okay, let's work on something else right now.
So it almost seems like you have to have school board people.
Yeah, there are a lot of players.
Components.
It's the school board, it's the district people, and then it's, for school buses, usually schools contract out to another entity to be in charge of school buses. So you get triple, and you really surprisingly, there is not a lot of incentive coming from the schools. It's really quite shocking.
What's the population of Bedford, and how many volunteers do you have in Bedford 2020? Or what is the Bedford 2020 community volunteers and businesses combined?
The population of Bedford is 17,500 volunteers.
I mean, I guess we have maybe a core group of about 30 to 40 of our most active volunteers. If we're having a big event like a summit, that list grows to 100. When we do something like a Meatless Monday, we actually, brought in volunteers to be part of that committee. So I'm not exactly answering your question, but one great way to get volunteers is, instead of, some people want to be involved day in and day out, but if there's a campaign or a program that would interest somebody, that's a great way to get a volunteer and form a big steering committee to contribute.
I have a question also about the structure. Because you mentioned that if you have a program, you would bring it to the town board. So are you working with the committees that are already established in Bedford? They have their own committees, or do you function as a public committee of Bedford?
Well,
When we first started off, the town board appointed a Bedford Energy Action Panel, we called it BEAT. And it had the same kind of setup as B2020 does, the areas of interest and task force. When B2020 became incorporated, the Bedford Energy Advisory Panel, members of that became part of B2020. So while B2020 is a not-for-profit, independent organization, we work together with the town. I'm on both, so it's...
There's town committees and then your committee too.
But B2020 is our environmental group. They advise us, they help us with programs, and they carry out the sustainability programs for the town.
and I would say we have programs that are, really town partnerships like Waste and Recycling or Energize Bedford. That it's, it's a program of the town in Bedford 2020, and then we also have programs that are like Meatless Monday. The town passed a resolution in support of it, but it was a program in our community and actually in communities around, but not necessarily a town program.
When we were set up as a private 501c3, so it was a public-private partnership in the sense that we worked extensively with the elected officials, but we were distinctly private and separate from, and that has helped in a lot of different situations where if you want to do a program, and normally it really would have been a town program, but we take it on because we want to hire someone part-time. We don't want to pay all of the extra costs that would be attributed if they were a town employee. If the town has to put bids out to certain, multiple bids, and we have a person that we think was really going to be good with the project, we can just hire that person. So that sometimes helps. It gives you more flexibility to have the private-public partnership.
Nikki, thanks for doing this. In addition to your baseline data and your measurements of your progress, have you been influenced at all by drawdown in terms of identifying priorities?
Absolutely. It's our Bible. Oh, okay. Drawdown is a book. I don't know if you all are aware. Drawdown. It's a book by who's the author? Paul Hawkins. Yeah, Paul Hawkins. He was the owner of Smith and Hawkins, and he left that business and wrote this book. And it is a fascinating book that basically says, okay, everyone's talking about climate change, but no one's really talking about how to solve the problem. And he managed to, I think he put out an RFP for academicians, scholars, people who are involved in climate activities, and they joined him and did research on what are the most effective steps you can take to impact climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and more importantly, what is the cost of doing it and what is the benefit of doing it. And then he ranked them 1 through 100. And the book, I recommend the book to anyone who's interested in climate change, because one of the issues that you brought up in terms of food, if food waste were a country, it would be the 4th largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So he says he's about to publish, I haven't heard whether it's coming or not, but it's called Regeneration or Regenerate, and it's talking much more about the value of all of these greenhouse gas emission projects in terms of the money they create, the jobs they create, but that hasn't come out yet.
Why don't I have a chance to ask you guys to share with us some of the stuff you're doing?
No, we're asking about our problems. So, similar to the question about schools, have you had any success in activating your houses of worship in this space?
That comes and goes as well, but we have an interfaith council that in the very beginning, the members of that interfaith council were very active. So your church has...
Talk about that.
I go to the Croton Presbyterian Church, and we were energized. We had the whole an energy audit and a retrofit through the Energized program. So we have a rabbi on our board who's head of a large temple. They've done a great deal of environmental initiatives. So we do have it, but we have to keep working at it.
Yeah, we haven't been working at it hard enough recently. I mean, at one point it was really good, and now so we got to get it back.
You're praying to do better.
So one thing though that's actually this idea of ambassadors, and while we're not actively going necessarily house of worship to house of worship, but some of our volunteers have gone to their house of worships and been leaders in getting a recycling program going, or getting something going. And that idea of ambassadors is a big one, because even though we have volunteers and staff, we can only do so much. And if we're going to really reach our entire community, and that's something we want to do, is go deeper and wider in our community, we need some neighbors talking to neighbors and ambassadors telling people what they're doing and why it's important.
You mentioned what communities are doing. I just wanted to, I think Brian Pugh eloquently outlined it, and also I see Lindsay Ogden's here, who's done a lot with this, with the sustainability committee. There's a lot of initiatives getting started. But I also want to mention that I'm on the board of Sogno River Audubon, and I think you're going to be participating. There's a climate boot camp that's going to be in November. And also there's a really wonderful film from Paris to Pittsburgh about climate change, and that's going to be at the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center on September 25th. And the boot camp is at the county center. The county is working some with this, so I think there is some hope out there in working with other community, with the whole community. And our perspective is what it does to the birds, with climate change. But it's part of it. But the whole.
And what it does to the birds is a dramatic, demonstration of what climate change is doing. I mean, it's hard to envision a greenhouse gas emission, but it's also hard to imagine I don't know how many hundreds of species of birds going extinct.
Yeah, it's really scary.
I've got a question for the group. As we are thinking of our next 10 years and thinking about, okay, we have had certain successes in some areas and not as successful in other areas, and your town has had successes in certain areas and not as much success in others. We're trying to figure out a way that we can share best practices and share issues, barriers, who has figured out how to do this. And the concept would be to have various towns be members of a federation, where the problem is that if you have too much talk and too much, you lose your time to get things done. So how can you do it efficiently, but how can you actually share best practices and share problems? What do you all think about something like that, and how do you think it could be organized efficiently?
So we already have two amazing organisations in Westchester. We have the Federated Conservationists of Westchester County, run by the amazing Anne Jackie Holmes and the board. And Nadia here in T-Town, who runs Environmental Leaders Learning Alliance, which has an amazing discussion group where we ask for information. What is your policy on trees? What is your all those things, and you get a whole wealth of information back from this fantastic listserv. So I think we have things in place. We just need to use them.
Yeah. It was just over here that this is something that we should talk about. So for anyone who doesn't know, out of T-Town, works with Pace University and with Federated Conservationists of Westchester County, we have a program called the Environmental Leaders Learning Alliance. And what that is an environmental education and collaboration program for municipal officials across the Lower Hudson Valley. So mostly Westchester, with a few others. So part of what we're doing is we are expanding that as a way to have not only educational workshops, but to have it as a collaborative space for the municipalities to be able to kind of cross-pollinate and share information and what's worked for them and what hasn't, which will be expanded onto a website shortly.
Okay. Also, many people put this together tonight. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank Rachel Bernstein for suggesting that we invite Bedford 2020 and Karen Boyd for working so closely with her on this. I want to thank Peter Fontana for coming and helping us with the AV equipment today. I want to thank the village, Mayor Pugh, and the village board, and everybody that works for the village for being behind this initiative. And I want to thank all of you for coming out also, plus our guest speakers, our panel, and Shabu. And one more thing, Patty is going to speak to us about the Global Living Series will be in November, and usually in November we show a film to be determined. We're investigating 2 or 3 different ones of them, and it is always the second Tuesday of the month. We have these series in September, November, March, and May. April's birthday, October is Daffodil Planting. So, and we welcome all of you to come to the next Living Series. Thank you all for coming. Without you,